Hey everybody, welcome to the Lavante web series featuring our Lavante SIM, where we talk about how we can simplify supplier information management. We like to take these groups on every 2 weeks or so and do an exploration of what supplier information management means to the folks that are attending these calls and see if we can answer some questions. The product we focus on the Lavante Connect application is SIM. SIM stands for Supplier Information Management. And the icon, I use it right, I think is an important icon because the 5 boxes on the perimeter of that icon represent the 5 business processes that we enable. So just to sort of take that theme, you have company self-serve on one side, supplier self-serve on the other side. When we go through the application, it really cuts in half. You have the company's experience, that's the first thing that we're going to go through, and the company will go on their own application. So we'll look at some charts and graphs and slides, and then the supplier is invited, either in mass or on a one-off, from the company, from your company, and then they will go on the application and they'll be asked to fill out their profile. And they'll be told that they're 79% complete or 16% complete, et cetera, et cetera. And then we walk them through a series of steps to complete their profile. Both sides of the application, it's a two-sided application. How do suppliers get data in? How do you take it out? Look very similar. Both client and supplier have recourse to go to this website and pull down and upload just volumes of information that make commerce run so much more smoothly for both of them. So what I'll do is right now I'm going to transition. Obviously, we've all seen probably 1,000 different versions of this. We're at a login screen. I'm going to give you one of our demo logins. There's a couple of them, depending on where we go, if there's any questions. I just may jump into another type of demo or another example of the demo, but for now, we use the Acme logo to represent the dummy corporation. In your mind, you can substitute the name of your company for this logo here. Again, this is the client experience, so everything we're going to show in this application is what you would be going through and what you would be seeing. Now, what I want to do is I want to move through this fairly quickly. Right now, the page we've landed on is the high-level dashboard. Once you get 2, 3, 4 months into a project like this, you're going to have a lot of colorful data populating these graphs and charts and numbers, etc. Right now, before we can look at this level of detail, I like to start on the right side of the navigational menu. Right here, you can see there's a main navigational menu. It shows the dashboard. That's where we land. There's a supplier library of all your suppliers. And then there's a couple of options that you can do to get started. Where I want to draw everyone's attention first is Manage Contacts. Now, if you click on the Manage Contacts tab, here's your opportunity to determine in your organization, in which different division in your organization, which job title from which department has access to the system. Now, you can add a contact, and I think all of you kind of know how this goes. I'm not going to open every box. I think you guys can assume where these boxes go, and you can talk about, who in what department, let's say Sally Smith, et cetera, needs to be set up. You can also determine which address is she part of because you may want to keep it confined to just a certain number of addresses. And you can go through a series of very simple steps and assign your contacts that are responsible for working on your supplier information management system. Now you can let your imagination wander. Who in your organization would you like to give some access to suppliers? Maybe tax, maybe treasury, procurement certainly, AP of course, etc., etc., etc. Once you set up your contacts, you then want to manage your files. Now, when we get to the Manage File tabs, there's probably 2 major things you're ever going to want to do with files. I will keep it very simple. You're going to want to upload files to get your data into the system so that we can start communicating with your suppliers. Right now, our system is blank. You send in a vendor master file. We focus on a very simple workflow here where you want to upload a file. You want to select the file, that might be your complete supplier file, and then you can browse whatever drive you think is appropriate so that you can find, I'm just going to pick a random Excel spreadsheet, and let's say we import this into the field. Now, I haven't actually picked a vendor master file, so I'm not going to upload it. I'll cancel it. But like every good cooking show, we show you how to make the ingredients and put them together, and then we already have one in the oven. You can see here where I already have a VMF, a vendor master file. It's a file that I have already run for the most part, and you can see here where it's just loading and showing the time and the time of day when it was initially run. So that's how you upload your file. This information and the progress of this file shows up here. it also shows up on that colorful dashboard page that we initially landed on. So that's kind of how you upload files. Of course, you're going to have questions about what template should I use. We have a very modest template library here just for demonstration purposes, but you can download the vendor master file template. It could show you the different column headings, and then you can, copy that file, those headings, create that in IT or yourself if you have access to the proper databases, and then upload it from here. Or perhaps it's significantly more complicated than that, sophisticated than that, and you require a little bit more hands-on. That's absolutely fine as well. Now, once you get this information up into the application, we want to communicate out with your suppliers, update data, and at some point, you're going to want to take that refreshed, clean data that's been treated and download the file. Now, I think this tab will be fairly self-explanatory. You can either take the entire clean supplier file, or you can pull an incremental file. Perhaps you want to pull the file daily. Perhaps you want to pull it weekly. Perhaps you want to pull it monthly. Let's say you want to go back in time and say, I want it from September 1st through, let's just go back and say the last day of September for the sake of argument, and you get a file that's refreshed and updated, and you want to pull that back into your ERP system with all the refreshed data on a monthly basis. You can request this file, and again, we have a couple of these files that we've already pulled previously that are just sort of stacking up here. We've pulled these for demonstration purposes, and then multiple people can pull them for different reasons, et cetera, et cetera. Again, that's how you upload files into the system. That's how you download files. Now, from here, we've talked about managing your contacts and managing your files. The whole purpose of managing the contacts and files is because you're starting an initiative to communicate out with your suppliers. You're going to want your suppliers to come into the application. Remember, we cut the page in half and we said suppliers have their own application. We're not looking at it now, but the supplier application is very much determined by your configuration. Now, you have the opportunity to create profile fields, your system and methodology associated with outreach, timing, how frequent, what a letter may look like, et cetera, with the communication templates, and then some workflows for approvals, et cetera, et cetera. I think everybody basically gets this information here. And then as you go through the different profile fields, you can determine some simple stuff. Right now we're in the section called company profile information. That's basic data. That's the stuff you're going to find on Wikipedia. Company business name. You might say, yeah, that's required. I certainly want my supplier to fill out their company business name. I want them to fill out who they're doing business as. I want them to fill out their company registration. I want them to fill out if they have U.S. income, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In some cases, you might say, I absolutely need them to fill out their remit to and order from, and I need to be notified when they do that. So hopefully everybody has a clear vision of that on the screen. We don't need to walk through this. I think everyone's probably taken part in an exercise like this. You really only need to touch this one side one time. And when you do that, we're happy to sit down with you and kind of walk through some best practices of how to do it. If anything is set up and it creates a workflow gap, that's no problem at all. Obviously, this is very much point and click, and we can reshape it and rephrase it as we go. But just so you know, you have the opportunity to do that here. So what we've walked through is you manage your contacts, you manage your files, you manage the configuration, so that's the supplier experience. And now you've pretty much set everything up so you can reach out to suppliers. Your suppliers start coming into the network and updating their data. I've now moved to a suppliers page. So you can see here where this is one of the remaining tabs in the main navigation. And we're at the supplier, what I call the supplier library. So this is your supplier database. In this case, we've done our level best, everybody, to fill in 1,000 different pieces of supplier information, 1,000 different suppliers. We have a couple different column headers here. This is configurable. You may want to know what the organization associated with the supplier is. For instance, you may have 4 organizations that could bring on a supplier, north, south, east, and west. Maybe you want to dump that into these row headers or column headers. I don't know, but there's configurability. And from this page, you can do a lot of things having to do with searching the supplier database. In this case, on the main page, obviously you can search suppliers by supplier ID. I don't think I need to spell this out too much, but let's say you want to find all suppliers by ACM. You'd get a stack of the ACM suppliers. You can select all the ACM suppliers, and then these buttons light up down here. Maybe you want to start an outreach project. Maybe you want to send them a personal, or excuse me, a specific email for this population of suppliers. You may want to just choose one of them, and you choose to deactivate them, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll have the ability to go through all the different suppliers and make those types of decisions. There's a whole host of other things you're going to want to search through. The legal identification, this will show you suppliers and where they stand in terms of collecting and validating TINs. We also have something for OFAC screening. So like this would obviously roll up into risk, into fraud, validating addresses. And then there's also a host of suppliers where you requested, hey, if they change something, I want to know so that I can notify it or notify it and approve it. Again, it all rolls up into the fact that we have a supplier library, and you have the ability to kind of walk through that. Now with that, I'm close to the bottom of the hour. What I want to do is I want to go back to the dashboard page and just say all the information we've populated, all the requests to suppliers to fill out that supplier attribute data, that supplier information, all starts to populate these reports. Which suppliers have been invited and which ones have registered. Which suppliers have we been able to effectively outreach, and then, for instance, which ones registered properly, which ones started filling out their profile but it's incomplete, which ones fully filled out their profile. There's a lot of different stages here in the profile completion workflow, but we can kind of walk through that and show you how to look at them in larger buckets. You are onboarding new suppliers on a monthly basis. There's a report for it. I just pulled a couple of very important supplier field reports here, suppliers by spend diversity. That may or may not be important to you as well. OFAC screening, etc. And then you have the option to kind of, collapse different pages, or maybe you want to view something at a full page or back. And it just sort of gives you flexibility here. So this is where you land. I love this page too because it's a to-do list. So any reports that you pulled or any pending projects or pending action items all get listed here. And then there's a series of quick links. You may want to look for, that tax identification report we drilled down to on another tab. You may want to screen for OFAC in a quick link, etc. Or, as we transition to the supplier experience now, you may want to invite a new supplier. And what I'll do here is I'm going to show you a demo that we go through. One supplier that we always rely on is a fictional supplier called MC Solutions. Any resemblance of some sort of real supplier is purely coincidental. I'm sure there's an MC Solution somewhere, or we just kind of picked this up because the initials of somebody who worked here was MC. We have a contact person here is, let's call him Bob Baker, and I don't need to fill this whole thing out, but we would fill this whole thing out and then we would invite that supplier. The invitation has been set. Now this invitation we've kind of thrown the kitchen sink at. It has a lot of verbiage on this invitation, but what's important, and you can configure this a bit if you don't want it to look exactly like this, or instead of 6 steps you can maybe get away with 3 steps, etc. But you have your logo up here, and then you have the Lavante logo, and you're telling people that you are working on Lavante Connect to secure supplier information, and that you must have the legal name of your business as registered with the IRS and tax identification number. That's how they get started, everybody. They click this link here, and they go to their sign-in page. I'll do that in just a moment. I want to point out one other thing. Possibly you've requested Bob to fill that out, but Bob knows that Sharon should be filling this out. So he has the opportunity to say, if you're not the contact for Acme Communications, you can go to this other page and supply another person's name. So that's nice functionality here, and also we capture that audit trail. In case Bob converts into Sharon, we now have a new person. So let's assume Bob goes to the login page. He accepts a couple of quick T's and C's, and he goes through this setup. Now, the setup asks for some basic level setting information such as password, preferred language, which we'll pick English, a challenge question, your childhood nickname was, let's call it Bo, and then moving on to the next page. Here's where we start to capture really substantial data. Let's say Bob is in the AR department, and he wants to give you his phone number. He's at 800 such and such, such and such. And then we're asking him to put his official company name and a TIN number, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And he's researched this. At this point, he's now started the process of giving you a TIN number. We still have recourse to get the W-9 if you need the W-9. and he can send that information directly to the IRS from here. We will capture this information, and on a daily basis, we take all the information that's been filled out here, and we ping it against the IRS website. We find out, does this match? If it does match, no problem. If it doesn't match, we'll go back out to Bob and say, hey, look, there seems to be a mismatch in your tax information. At that point, though, we don't stop him at this point. We wouldn't do the match right now, because now that he has all the momentum in the world and all the reason in the world to go to the next slides and fill that out, we want him to just fill this information out, put in a test-only signature, and submit. At this point after submittal, on one rail, that IRS validation takes place, and then another rail, he goes into a profile page so he can fill out different profile information. A question we always get right here is, we work with a lot of companies that have Canadian suppliers. There is a slightly different workflow for different areas of the world. So you can have GST or HST for Canadian suppliers. But also, if there's still U.S.-based income, you still revert back to some of that IRS TIN information as well. So at that point, as all this is getting reconciled at the IRS website, on a parallel track, Bob is able to submit this data, and then he goes into his supplier page. Now, again, there's MC Solutions on this. Bob has a couple different companies that he works with. Acme is not the only one. So he's already filled out some information. He's even put his logo, and he's even filled some company-level data. So his, instead of being 0% correct, his profile is already 79% correct. On this page here, this is his home page, he has some resources that he can pull from, such as a W-9, and if he has any questions about those legal docs. He has a help desk at Lavante that he can call if he needs assistance. And then he has information specific to Acme. You can populate this with whatever you want. You can put your name. You're going to take a couple phone calls if you do. Or maybe you can embed a couple code of ethics or code of conduct policies. Bob can review that information. Once he feels good about that, he goes to his profile. And the profile, I will not spend I won't spend a lot of time on these pages. This mirrors the configuration that you set up. The profile works in a couple different ways depending on how Bob goes through a to-do list. He has an actual list of items that he can click through, or he has some chevrons that he can advance through at the top of the page. So he can move from company details, fill out all this information, and move to business level details. Or right now we're in business level details, he can click back to the company logo. So hopefully all that information translates, and you can see the different ways with which Bob or your supplier can move freely through the system. He fills out this data, and then he can advance to the next page. And it's just a series of going through all the different questions and supplying the answers that you need him to supply so that you can do business with him. For instance, if he's a diverse business, he can click yes. He can fill out additional information, and if there's a document or certificate that goes along with it, he can browse his hard drive and upload that document as well. And then I'll move down the page fairly slowly so you can see any other type of information that we're endeavoring to capture on your behalf. You may want to configure the different supplier types that you're working with. You may want to capture your different insurance certificates. You may have a whole host of certificates, and you can add new certificates and configure them so that we're seeing the type of information you want to collect, and you're storing it at one source. Ultimately, the last tab is relationship-specific details. This is details that only you share with Bob. So he can choose Acme as the company, send you the different primary contacts, and then scroll down this list to see the kind of information you're trying to share specifically with the supplier, maybe a payment type that's supported. Perhaps he tells you, hey, I can do EFTs, I prefer wire transfer, create an authorization, fill in some other detail level information so that you can perform that type of functionality with him very quickly. With that, you can see the rest of the page, that the flavor and the level of information that we're storing. Also has the option to say if there's any conflict of interest. And then, again, it's certifying under a penalty of perjury that all the information is true, and he can put it in another electronic signature. At that point, he's pursuing 100% completion, and then you have all that data for yourself to be able to go into the application. I'm going back to your dashboard page, so I just made a big jump from Bob's experience back to yours, And as Bob fills all that information, not only is it represented in the different changes on the dashboard, but also in your supplier library, Bob is going to have a profile here in the supplier library. Let's say Bob is associated, he was with MC Solutions before, now if he's with Smart Technologies, you'll have a profile card of all this information filled out. Now, with that, everybody, that's the information that I am prepared to present today. I've tried to present this at a high enough level where you can get a flavor for what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish, and the value that we can present to your company or to your network or to you in your daily tasks. At the same time, though, I know there's a lot more drill down, a lot more questions, and a lot more specifics that we haven't covered today. And obviously, myself or anyone at Lavante is available to have that type of conversation. So with that, everybody, I appreciate you joining us for one of our bi-monthly webinars. That's the information I have prepared today. Other than that, hopefully we'll be talking to you very soon. Have a brilliant rest of your week, and until then.